TCU needs to get Chad Woodfork and their other young edge players on the field immediately.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 years. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. FanDuel's always got great deals going on. I'll tell you about that a little later on in the show. We're going to talk the Hoops weekend. Men play on Saturday, women play on Sunday. But we start today. We've been doing this series about what does TCU need to do in the spring transfer portal window. Let's go position by position and find somebody. So we're going to talk about edge rusher. Do they need to add someone? Do they need to stay put? I think they need to add somebody. They need to add one edge rusher in the transfer portal. But here's the main takeaway that I want you to have from this discussion today. Chad Woodfork, highest rated recruit in the 2025 class, early enrollee on TCU's campus, is going to go through spring ball. He needs to be on the field as soon as possible. And these other young edge rushers, that they brought in this 2025 class, because that was a huge emphasis with this recruiting class. We talked about it before. Andy Avalos takes the job. He's running a new defense. One of the things that he has to do upon getting on campus is he's got to find people that can rush the passer as stand-up edge rushers, because they didn't have those body types. They didn't have those types of players on the roster currently, because in the previous system under Joe Gillespie, that was not a priority. Avalos' defense, highly predicated on creating one-on-one matchups in the pass rush game and allowing guys to go win those matchups. So what does he do? Well, he goes and he gets Devin Deal from the transfer portal, who had an outstanding season and is still on the roster this year. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be a huge part of what they do. He goes and he gets Cooper McDonald from San Diego State, another transfer. Cooper was a good player for him. He's out of eligibility, so he's gone. Jonathan Bax had entered the transfer portal. Andy Avalos and the coaching staff, they meet with him. They say, hey, this is a new system, a new scheme. You're going to thrive here. We need you on this roster. So he withdraws his name. He stays on campus. He rotated in last year. He's going to have to take a bigger role this season. He might be your starter. It might be Devin Deal and Jonathan Bax. But regardless, he's going to get a lot more snaps this year. At least that's the hope. They've had big plans for him. He's one of those guys we've talked about in the last few off seasons. Well, now's the time. He made some big plays in spring camp a couple of years ago. Then he kind of disappeared. Last season, made some things happen later in the year. Had a strip, or he stripped the ball in that Oklahoma State game. Ran down the running back, punched the ball out, had a few tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He made some plays, made some things happen. He's got to show up more this season. He might be your starter opposite of Devin Deal when they go to that 5 defensive lineman package. There's not a ton of depth here at the moment. Or if you say that there is, you're counting on young freshmen to step up and play. So I feel like from a transfer portal spring window perspective, you got to go get one more player. One more experienced edge rusher who you can plug in and have in your 2 deep, so that you don't have to immediately throw all these freshmen into the fire. But that being said, Chad Woodfork is a dude who can play right away. He's 6'4", 220 pounds, 4-star player. Played his football at Humble Summer Creek. Great athleticism, great get off. I was watching, as I was preparing for this today, I was going back and watching some of his evaluations and some things people had to say about him. Texas Football did a segment on him. He has a 33.5-inch vertical. This is an athlete, man. This is not your typical hand-in-the-ground defensive end. I think he could do that. Like, they could add to his frame and do that, but this is an edge rusher. This is a stand-up edge rusher. And this is a dude that looks like he can wreak havoc as soon as he steps on campus at TCU. Had double-digit sacks last season. Led Summer Creek to a state title game appearance. Was a huge part of what they did. And there was attention coming from everywhere. TCU landed him in the summer, last summer. Texas Tech was super involved. LSU was involved late. He stayed with TCU. Coaching staff did a good job making sure that relationship was solid, reeling him in. You did not spend all that time, all that effort, and most likely a significant monetary commitment to just let this guy sit on the sidelines. Here's the thing with freshmen now. For a million years in college football, the system was you come in, you sit. You sit for a year, maybe 2. You learn. You figure out what it means to be a college football player. How do you balance all the different responsibilities you have? Get in the weight room. Get your body right. Get to a place physically where you can play with grown men. And by the time you're a sophomore or sometimes a junior, you're ready to contribute. Now you have the once in a blue moon type of guys, right? Maurice Claret, Adrian Peterson, that would just walk in and right away they're ready to play. But that was the exception, not the rule. Now, when we talk about freshman players, I don't think you can really worry about red shirts anymore. I don't think you can sit there and worry about red shirts. Does it still matter? Yes. How much eligibility you have still matters. But these guys want to play. Now, you can't force it. You can't just hand somebody a job just because of who they are. But don't get so caught up in this 4-game thing. Because you know what? If you don't play a talented player, there's a decent chance that when the season's over, they say, hey, I'm going to go explore other options because I want to go play. Is it fair? Maybe not. Is it something that's frustrating about college football the way it is today? Yes. But it's the world we live in. So Chad Woodfork, I don't think he's coming in. I mean, he's going to have to compete. You got to earn it. But put him on the field and give him opportunities to earn it. Because he looks like somebody that can play right away. And the bottom line is, behind Devin Deal and Jonathan Bax and maybe Zach Chapman, there's not a lot of guys on the roster currently who fit the mold of what you want from that position. So you go add one player in the transfer portal, but then let's look at this 2025 class real quick because Woodfork is the headliner. You also got Jared Martin, edge player from California. John Schobel. I'm still not totally sure where he's going to fit. He played inside linebacker at Columbus, but they recruited him as an edge player. Now, I don't know if they're going to have him as, I would think he'll be a stand-up edge. But I can't say that for sure. He feels like a tweener in some ways. Maybe a dude that they evaluate and say, well, we can put some weight on him and get him to a place where he's more of a hand-in-the-ground defensive lineman. But he's another player at this spot that makes sense. Anthony Williams from Shadow Creek. And then Keelan Abrams, who was not one of the more highly rated players in this class, but I'm a big-time Keelan Abrams fan because he put up huge numbers at DeSoto. He got to the quarterback. He got sacks in a district that was a meat grinder, man. You're playing some of the best teams in the state on a week-in, week-out basis. Keelan Abrams found a way to get to the quarterback. Now, he's under 200 pounds. He's 6 feet tall. So I think a lot of that was just him being a little slight, even for that spot where it's really about athleticism and flexibility. But I think he can be a dude. Now, is Keelan going to be able to play right away? I don't know. I have some reservations about that. But my point is, that's 4, potentially 5 players that you went and recruited in this cycle. And it totally makes sense why the defensive coaching staff gets on campus. They look at the roster. They say, hey, we don't have people that fit what we want to do at this spot. We got to go add numbers. So they made that a big priority in this last recruiting cycle, which I love. But for guys like Jared Martin, and especially Woodfork, get them on the field and let them go to work. Jonathan Bax, we're coming into year 3. He's shown some flashes. Again, you can't just hand it to somebody, but give him fair opportunities to prove what he can do. Excuse me. Because these are the guys that you have to have step up. I'm excited about this defense. I like what they got on the back end. A lot of experience at safety. Bud Clark coming back for another year. Every day that goes by, I'm more excited about that. Just because he's played so much college football. And he really seemed to get a new lease on life from a football perspective playing a new defense last year. He looked like a different player. Kylan Jackson maybe coming in from LSU and slide into a spot there. Keeping Jamel Johnson on the roster after he flirted with the portal. At corner, Avery Helm coming back. Got a couple experienced guys that you like. Linebacker, probably need to add a few players, but Caleb Alarm-Zor, Namdi Obizor, that's another place on the defense where you have a ton of snaps. There should be no reason. Like, if you get beat, it's going to be, in my mind, because teams are just better. But from a mental mistake standpoint, from a scheme standpoint, understanding your assignments, this crew should be passing with flying colors because they've played so much. And at this edge rusher place, yeah, Devin Deal, love it. He's going to be a contributor. I'm not worried about that. I think he's going to have another big season. Just get out of the way and let him go to work. These young players, though, this is a big-time year to bring these guys along, and it's similar to what we've talked about with the offensive line. Okay, you've done a good job of going heavy from a numbers perspective and recruiting those guys. Now you have to turn them into contributors. That's the next step. Same thing here. You got to make these guys into contributors, okay? And Woodfork is the headliner, but really all of them. You need a good hit rate on all these players because that's what's going to fill out your roster over the next few seasons. Go get one player in the transfer portal. Go get one edge rusher in the transfer portal, but everything else needs to be in-house, focused on development. Get these young players on the field. Let them have opportunities to go to work. When we come back, TCU basketball, the women, they're playing for a conference title. They win their last 3 games. They win a conference title. The men trying to continue to bolster that tournament resume. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. All right, FanDuel. They are one of our proud sponsors. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. You love it. You know about them. They always have these fantastic deals going on where if you're a new customer, you can get outstanding offers. And it's the same thing right now. New FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So win that first $5 bet, get $150 in bonus bets. They also give you the opportunity to place live bets during the game. NBA action going on right now. Second half of the season about to kick off. I'm still not over the Luka trade, but the Mavericks are going to play basketball. Hopefully Anthony Davis plays again this season. And you can make live bets on NBA games with the FanDuel app or at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. Again, new customers. You win your first $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, give it a try today. TCU men's basketball trying to continue to add to that resume. It's crazy. It really is wild how much just one win changes everybody's mood on things. I mean, that win against Texas Tech and TCU basketball, the men's team, in fairness, they had been playing better. Now, it was against teams that they should beat, but that win at home against West Virginia, that's not a bad West Virginia team. And you got to go to Morgantown later on in the schedule. And that's honestly, I think, aside from playing Baylor at home, that's going to be the toughest game left. That's another quad one opportunity, a chance to get a quad one win. But that win against West Virginia was impressive. The Oklahoma State game, it sort of felt like a throw up your hands and thank God we won. But Vashawn Allett hitting that huge 3, I mean, honestly, it saved your season because if you drop that one, then the win against Texas Tech doesn't matter as much. But because they were able to squeak a victory out and win that game, you know, it kind of kept them in good standing. And then you beat Texas Tech at home, which you had to have it, but you got it done. That's awesome. And, like, again, as frustrating as it can be at the beginning of these seasons, and even when you're kind of rolling in the middle of the year, Jamie's teams just continue to improve as the year goes on. Now, this group, it might be too little too late. They're on life support still, but everything's in front of you. I think every game left on the schedule is a winnable ball game. Doesn't mean you're going to do it, but you can beat Cincinnati on the road. Cincinnati is 5-10 in conference play. That's a game that you can win on the road. TCU lost there last year, and it was a frustrating loss. But that's a potential victory. And then you turn around and, you still get Baylor at home. You get UCF at home. The schedule in order. So Cincinnati on the road tomorrow. And then Tuesday you go to Morgantown to play West Virginia. UCF at home, Baylor at home, Colorado on the road. So the UCF and Colorado games, you can't drop those. And really, you can't drop tomorrow's game either. But if you finish the season, I still think 12-8 is a great goal to have. That means you drop one game in the last 5 here. If you finish the Big 12 regular season at 12-8 and you win a tournament game or two, even with a Big 12 league that is not as good as it's been in the past, or I guess I should say it's just not as deep because the 10 teams that you had there were so solid, and now you have 16, and there's, frankly, some teams that are at the bottom of the league. But if you finish with, an above 500 record by 4 games in the regular season, and you win a couple of Big 12 tournament games, even with the bad losses in non-conference play, which really it was just that tournament. I mean, you lose to Vandy on a neutral floor, that's acceptable. Losing to Colorado State and Santa Clara was horrible. And they know that, but, nothing you can do about it now. But if you can win 4 of these last 5 games and win a tournament game or two, I really like their chances to be there. Now, I know the net ranking doesn't look good right now. There's some things I'm kind of assuming will work out here, but they've given themselves a chance. And that's significant because for such a long time this season, it looked like things were pretty dire. I still contend, though, that the biggest and most important thing moving forward, this team seems to have good chemistry. I think they're enjoying playing together right now. And I feel like regardless, if you just make any sort of postseason tournament and make a decent run, then that could be good for team chemistry and just keeping these guys happy. But the biggest priority is going into this offseason, you got to find a way to keep Jace Posey happy. Malik Diallo, David Punch. This core group, next year, if you roll into the season with a lineup of, and it's kind of, don't know exactly who will be in what position, but if you roll into the season with a lineup of Collins, Frankie Collins, Vashawn Ouellette, David Punch, Ernest Uday, Jace Posey, if that's your starting 5, I like the sound of that. And then, really for the first time in a few years, you could focus your portal efforts on, okay, maybe let's go find one more big name, or let's focus more on bench help. Who could be a 7th or 8th man for us that could come in and be some instant offense off the bench and give us some more depth? That would make a big difference. But first things first, you play Cincinnati tomorrow, 11 a.m. tip. Have to find a way to keep this rolling, get a victory, and just continue to pump out as many of those wins as you can as the season goes on. The TCU women, there's a lot of different things that could happen here, but the simplest scenario still remains. If you finish with wins in your last 3 games, if you win out, you're a Big 12 champion. Now, 2 of those games on paper are really tough. You play West Virginia at home on Sunday at 11 a.m. West Virginia is coming off a victory against Kansas State. And my concern about this matchup, so since that Kansas State ball game that TCU lost in Manhattan a couple weeks ago, it's become obvious what everybody is trying to do. Kansas State pressured the ball. They were doing a lot of traps in the backcourt, really full court. They were picking up the point guards and the combo guards that TCU had out there and forcing them to get the ball over the half-court line and execute their offense with all this havoc pressure going on. That's what West Virginia does. I watched that Kansas State game, and West Virginia gets up and down the floor. They can shoot threes. It's not like the Bob Huggins 90 feet of hell that he ran, but they make you work. They make you work to get the ball up the floor. And so, it's no secret they're going to try to do the same thing. And I think that's really taking a toll on like Haley Van Lith and her scoring because she's using so much energy just getting up the court, running the offense. So if you can find a way to get in a better rhythm offensively, that would be outstanding. But this is a big one. If you win this and you take care of business against Houston, you set up a potential like winner-take-all game in Waco a week from Sunday for a Big 12 title, which would be pretty awesome to see. But this is a tough ball game. And I know they've been really pushing, like, need the fans there, need a good environment. 11 a.m. tip on a Sunday is tough. But if you can get out there and be loud, go for it. Because, we're talking about conference title implications happening there in Fort Worth over the next week or so. When we come back, we'll wrap things up. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. TCU baseball, we get to see what this team is really made of. That was an impressive series sweep in San Diego. Now, I don't know how good the Toros are going to be this year, but they were a 40-win team last year. They were a conference title team. They were a team at least before the season that was projected to be in the NCAA tournament. So to go on the road and to win all those games, and especially that Monday afternoon game when you have a spot starter, and San Diego did too. Like, you knew that was probably going to be a 7-6 type of ball game. They got down early. They hung in there. They came back and they won. They got down on Friday night, 4-0. They came back and they won. Series at Globe Life Field, Michigan this afternoon at 3 p.m., Arkansas at 6 p.m., and then Kansas State on Sunday. Kansas State's 1-4. Arkansas and Michigan are undefeated. Arkansas swept Wazoo at home. Michigan went, I think, like to Cabo maybe. Jamie Plunkett had a good series preview on Horned Frog Blitz. He said they were in a tournament and they won all 3 of their games. That's a really good program. Big Ten not known for baseball, but Michigan is. So 3 p.m. today, and then the game against Arkansas Saturday. The biggest storyline for me, I want to see how this lineup or what this lineup looks like against good pitching, against solid pitching on a day-to-day basis, because you're going to see deeper staffs in the Big 12. And the bottom line is, like, you have to be able to produce and score runs against those types of arms. And I'm not sure that TCU really saw the depth at San Diego that they're going to see throughout the rest of the season. So that's my biggest question mark. But overall, a really good start to the year, and I'm excited to see how they perform and how they're up to the challenge. One thing that does suck, if you forget about this, it's on Flow Sports. So I just listened to Chuck Lamandola on the KTC broadcast because I refuse to even get the free trial for Flow Sports because it's very expensive. Maybe I should check to see if they're like a sponsor of ours before I started ranting about it. But anyway, I'm not going to get the free trial of Flow Sports because I'm afraid I'll just let the trial turn into an actual subscription. But if you want to check that out, you can, and just so you can watch some baseball this weekend. But it's there and nowhere else. Yesterday, we talked about TCU adding a lot of coaches to the coaching staff. Here's my man, Vince. He says, I see desperation. Soon there will be more coaches than players on the field. Everyone wants to interject their ideology that never turns out well. Call me crazy, but it seems like if he's hiring people to address specific criticisms with the athletic staff, maybe. Yeah, I said this on the show. So the point of the show was TCU's added a couple of coaching staff members. Josh Bookbinder from Texas Tech and Cedric Williams, who's coming over from Troy. Bookbinder's going to work with the linebackers. He was a linebackers coach at Texas Tech. Cedric's going to work with the defensive line. And yes, you could approach it as, man, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I think from a positive standpoint, it's more voices. It's also just more people and more eyes on the field. And having an assistant coach at every specific position group, I think that could do wonders for the position coaches themselves. Now, again, it depends on the help you get. Like, I think in the case of Randy Clements, it's awesome. I'm not going to pretend like I know a lot about Cedric. He's a young coach. He's a former defensive lineman, very young coach. But he's really there, I think, to learn more than anything. The Bookbinder did a really good job at Texas Tech with linebackers. And now he gets to help Ken Wilson develop this program even more, which should be fun to see. Off Track says, not sure if we're hurting Sonny or he doesn't know how to create culture with what he has, but he believes we have talent. Without culture, you've got nothing. I thought, it's really difficult. I'm always skeptical or hesitant to talk about culture because I'm not in the locker room every day. But it did seem like that team pulled together last year. I don't think even with the schedule they had, they would have won 5 of their last 6 or 6 of their last 7 without good culture there, without liking each other and caring about one another. So the fact that they did that was encouraging to me. But I think 2 years ago, yeah, they definitely struggled in that area. And that's a question that Sonny's going to have to answer moving forward. We'll be back on Monday with hoops coverage and football and more. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts.